Right. For those of you who haven't been up here, which is Richard and Chris, 30 seconds, no more, on yourself or whatever. Richard.
Right, good afternoon. Yes, railways are in my blood, with my father having bought himself a Rovex train set, which I was allowed to play with in the 50s, going through railway preservation organisations in the Midlands, lobby groups. I've now developed a very strong personal interest as secretary of a rail user group with the urban railway, one which has grown over many years.
Okay, thanks, Richard. And Chris, who is almost minus a finger because he was playing trains and found out that rails weigh 95 pounds per yard and are rather heavier than he thought. Chris, go on, show it to the world. Come on, don't be...
I've said to Christian I shall never criticise health and safety again. These things hurt. I'm Chris Austin. I had the privilege of working with Chris Green for many years in Network South East, 30 years on BR, 12 years in the privatised railway. I'm retired now, but I'm still a board member for the Association of Community Rail Partnerships, and I'm here today on behalf of Rail Future. My colleague Norman Bradbury unfortunately is off sick, so I'm taking his place. And Rail Future is a national organisation, a voluntary organisation campaigning for improved rail services and the contribution rail can make to sustainable transport. Many of the causes we espouse and the views we hold on the benefits and merits of rail are in this manifesto document which we produced for the election. And my colleague Hugh Yeager has some copies of that. If you'd like to see him or me afterwards, we're very happy to share that with you and any other details you'd like to know about Rail Future.
All right, enough of the publicity stuff. Right, okay, let's have a batch of 3 questions. From people, hopefully from people who haven't asked questions before. Chap down here. And there's a chap in a white shirt in the dark up there. Yeah.
Tim Calo, the Air Valley Rail Users Group. I'd just like to ask about connections and holding connections. There's been a good deal of talk about the importance of interchange, but when you have a Sheffield train arriving 7 minutes late at Wakefield and the Pontefract train leaves in full sight, spot on time, it can be, that kind of thing can make passengers think that the railway is being run for the people playing trains and not for the passengers.
Okay. There's a chap in a white shirt there. Yes, for that chap there. I'm trying to choose people who haven't asked a question already. And then there's a chap high in the gods there with the white shirt as well. Right.
Hello, Andy Norris, Mouchel. Just a quick question on shared stations where there's multiple TOC usage. I've never heard any research showing whether the performance of stations is better or worse, and the passenger focus research. Is there anything on that that would be interesting?
Okay, and the fellow right up there. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter Wharton from Parsons Group International. I live in Harpenden, Hertfordshire, and one of the things where the TOC consistently over the last 6 months has distorted the figures is because they have the trains that are going to stop at a station not stopping. So in other words, they may run fast out of St Albans and then, whoops, you actually get to St Albans, we're now not stopping the train until Luton and then to Bedford in order to recover their journey time. And the second thing is with the Plus Bus scheme, it's all very well, but you can't get down to the station to use it if you want to buy a ticket. And therefore, what's the incentive? And when there's no communication as to how the buses are running, how do you then expect people to actually know, well, I've got to wait now at the bus stop?
Right, let's just, is there anybody with a question for Mike Story? Because he's there with about Projects Olympics. Anybody question? There. Oh, sorry, that chap there.
Hello, Andrew Saffrey from London Borough of Harrow. I thought it was quite inspiring the way that the Olympics seem to have got things moving that may not have happened otherwise. Is there a role for a similar sort of organisation going forward after the Olympics on regional basis to act as an intermediary between local government and other agencies and Network Rail? Because there does seem to be a big step, and there's no kind of intermediary who can sort of act on the behalf of smaller organisations to help changes be made, things like station access and just lobbying for better services.
Good question. Right. Okay. Let's start. Connections. Anybody want to talk about connections?
Shall I kick off?
Yeah. Ashwin.
Okay.
Yes. Connection.
This is a difficult one because in some situations you're going to have a small number of passengers making the connection and lots of people sitting on the train, and so you've got a balance there, and clearly the answer is that where that train is 7 minutes late at Sheffield, because frankly it knows it's got plenty of recovery time to get itself back onto PPM by the time it ends the journey, that adds to the problem because the train crew are perhaps less bothered about that 7 minutes at Sheffield, and so the kind of, as far as possible, that's partly why we want to look at intermediate stations as a way of addressing that issue. Clearly, in some situations, there'll be more people who are going to be delayed by the connection, and the delay might be quite significant. And I think you want the train operators to be sensible, but you've got to recognise that often there'll be more passengers on the kind of who are not making a connection who are going to be delayed if you're always holding trains and accepting delay as a result of that.
Chris.
I agree with what Ashwin says. I like the questioner, I've been a victim at Exeter St David's of seeing the Exmouth train disappear just as the London train runs in, so we've all done it. One of the ways of dealing with it is actually to be selective, to pick out the trains that have the most important connections. Clearly at Crewe, if you have 100 plus changing for Chester or Holyhead, that's an important connection to maintain, and you can hardwire that, and you can judge performance on the basis of that. Equally, you shouldn't try and have a fixed rule that applies for everything, whether or not people are connecting. There is a judgment to be made. The train operator, on behalf of passengers, or the local passenger representatives, are probably the best people to make those judgments and to fix those connections that need fixing. One of the other things is that I think operators could be a little more flexible given the performance targets that they have to meet. And I would just say to Ashwin, one of the potential laws of unintended consequences, if you tighten up the time to 5 or time to 10, you lose that flexibility. At the moment, an operator could take a judgment to delay a train by 1 or 2 minutes to make the connection. If you're going to hold him to absolute punctuality at the terminus, make sure you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
How harsh is the punishment they get if they delay a train? I mean, do they really get fined for every train that's late?
£150 a minute.
Is that? I mean, that's essentially right. So it cost them £150, which is probably on a small branch line or something. It's probably more than the revenue that they got on the train, right? So hence, no, sorry. Now, Chris, can you deal with the multi-TOC question? Which basically your question was that did that affect performance if there's several TOCs using the station?
Well, I just wanted to know if generally for a platform like Hayward Heath, which has got 2 TOCs using it, is that better or more challenging as far as the station goes and how it serves its passengers?
Right.
I'm not an expert on this, but I've not seen anything to suggest there's a particular difficulty. I think that's partly reflects the contractual arrangements between the parties, and I think much more importantly it reflects the practical working relationships at station level, and the fact that you've got a group of people there who may have Southern on their cap badge, but actually they've been doing it for some years now, way back to when only one company was operating it. It was called British Rail. So actually train dispatch ceases to become, I think, an issue of which company's train you're dispatching. It's actually getting the trains out to meet the targets, which is what's driving you.